Very good morning, friends. I hope you're all doing safe and healthy. Well, I have been discussing some important aspects of India's 2 with you in a couple of videos last. And today in this video, we're going to discuss the treatment of fixed overheads in particular. That means we're talking in terms of the factory or what you call the production overheads or the manufacturing overheads in terms of inventory valuation. Well, I would say there is a misconception which people have got, and they tend to believe that when you're looking at inventory valuation as per Index 2, we follow what we call an absorption costing of accounting. Well, I would say it is partly true that we do use a concept of, we can say, absorption cost accounting, but it's not completely an absorption cost accounting. Now, why I'm saying that it's not a complete absorption costing basis, I think let's dig this in detail because we're going to refer the para number 13 of the Index 2, which elaborates on 3 different situations. How do you consider the factory overheads as a part of the inventory valuation? Let's find this in detail. जो बच्चे सीए फाइनल की अपनी तैयारी कर रहे हैं मई 22 और नवंबर 22 के लिए, उनके लिए इस वक्त सब्सक्रिप्शंस पर बहुत अच्छी ऑफर चल रही है। आप सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1 की बात करें या सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 2 की बात करें या कॉम्बो ऑफर्स की बात करें या इंटरमीडिएट पर, इस वक्त अगर आप अपनी सब्सक्रिप्शन प्लान करते हैं तो 6 मंथ्स पर आपको 1 मंथ एक्स्ट्रा मिलेगा, 12 मंथ्स पर आपको 2 मंथ्स एक्स्ट्रा मिलेंगे और 24 मंथ्स पर आपको 4 मंथ्स एक्स्ट्रा मिलेंगे। इसके लिए आपकी जो ऑफर है वो 10th of February तक ओपन है और इसके अंदर आपको एक कॉल नंबर भी मिल सकता है जहां पर आप और डिटेल्स इसके अंदर जान सकते हैं। सीए फाइनल ग्रुप 1 और ग्रुप 2 की अगर आप कॉम्बो प्लान्स लेते हैं उनमें भी ये ऑफर्स अवेलेबल है और इंटरमीडिएट के अंदर भी आपके पास ये ऑफर्स हैं। 12 मंथ्स पर आपको 2 मंथ्स एक्स्ट्रा, 18 मंथ्स पर 2 मंथ्स एक्स्ट्रा और 24 मंथ्स पर 4 मंथ्स एक्स्ट्रा। और इन सभी क्लासेस को सब्सक्राइब करने के लिए आपको लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में मिलेंगे और साथ में 10% डिस्काउंट भी अवेल कर सकते हैं। इसके लिए मेरा कोड इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं CAKB10। तो किस बात का इंतजार है, आइए लेट्स क्रैक इट। You can see the para number 13 of Index 2, quite a long paragraph indeed, but I think just let's have a little look in terms of things. You know, when you're looking in terms of the allocation of the fixed production overheads, it very clearly says in para number 13 that it is based on a normal capacity of production, which means that I am supposed to calculate a recovery rate. Now, if I'm supposed to calculate a recovery rate, what am I supposed to do? Let's say the total fixed overhead is, let's say 20 lakhs. And let's assume the normal production level is 1 lakh. So you get a recovery rate which is 20 rupees per unit. So when you're going to consider the inventory valuation, we're going to consider the fixed factory overheads at the rate of 20 rupees per unit, which is computed on the basis of normal production. Here you can say that yes, we are applying an absorption costing principle. Then it says further, if I leave what is a normal capacity, on the next line we can see the actual level of production may be used if it approximates the normal capacity. Like that is situation number 1. Which means he says that instead of considering the normal production, I could rather consider the actual production to calculate a recovery rate. And I think if the normal and the actual production both is 1 lakh, we are still getting a recovery rate at the rate of 2 rupees a unit. Then it says further, the amount of fixed overheads allocated to each unit is not increased as a consequence of low production. Now, this is a second situation. Let's say, for example, if your actual production is below the normal production, he says, no worry, don't take the actual production into account. You will still use a recovery rate based on a normal production, which means we are sticking to the concept of absorption costing. If you calculate a recovery rate based on a normal capacity levels, then you stick to that rate even if the actual production is less. Now, what will happen if your actual production is less? This would mean that there is going to be an under recovery. because you are incurring an X amount, and then if you recover on the basis of the actual production, which is less than the normal production, you're going to get under recovery. And it calls that under recovery as unallocated overheads is taken as an expense in the period in which it is incurred. So the company is following a pure absorption costing where there is any under recovery, and that is being taken in the profit and loss as a period expense. Then it says further, in periods of abnormally high production. Now that is a third situation. In periods of abnormally high production, the amount of fixed overheads allocated is decreased. You change the recovery rate. Now that is the main thing. Now, if your actual production is more than the normal production, what we are doing, we are changing the recovery rate. The moment you change a recovery rate, are we applying an absorption costing? No. I would rather say that we're applying a modified absorption costing, because when you apply a recovery rate based on absorption costing, you will get an under recovery when the actual production is less. You're going to get an over recovery when the actual production is greater. But in the application of Ind AS 2, we are never going to get over recovery. If your actual and normal production is equal, no problems. But if the actual production is less, I'm still using a recovery rate based on normal production. But what happens if the actual production is greater? He says you need to change the recovery rate so that the inventory is not measured above cost. So you're going to change the recovery rate, and instead of taking the rate based on actual normal production, we are taking it on actual production. Which means, in simple words, if somebody were to ask me to give a crux in terms of para number 13, I would say that you need to consider the measurement of inventory considering factory overheads to be divided by normal production or actual production, whichever is greater. Believe me, it works in all three situations. Whenever you need to calculate a recovery rate, just consider the fixed factory overheads divided by the normal or actual, whichever is greater, you're going to get a recovery rate, which would lead to an under recovery but would never lead to an over recovery. So which in other words means we are indirectly applying a modified absorption costing in terms of inventory valuation. Isn't that pretty interesting indeed? So that's all in this video. Wait for some more interesting issues coming on Ind AS 2. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye and take care.